Welcome to Shaping Sustainable Places. I'm Emalee Mandl. In this episode, we're diving into how data and digital technologies and artificial intelligence are making construction and the built environment more efficient, more sustainable, and safer. Imagine a world where every decision in a massive construction project, from choosing materials to managing complex regulations, is informed by clear, precise data. A world where technology doesn't just digitize old processes, but actively helps us solve problems and build smarter. That world is closer than you think. Today, our two guests will explain how AI and data have become a strategic asset, and exactly how they are helping create more efficient, safer, and more sustainable buildings and infrastructure. Dareen Salama started out as a structural engineer, but saw the potential of AI long before the development of large language models, such as ChatGPT. Dareen is co-founder and CEO of Gryps, which structures construction and financial and regulatory data for managing capital projects. Welcome to the podcast, Dareen.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And we also have Mike Zeppieri, Vice President for Emerging Technologies with Skanska USA Building. Welcome, Mike.
Great. Thank you for having me.
And I thought we'd start with Dareen. Can you first please just give us a little more background on yourself and tell us more about your company, Gryps?
Sure. So I started off, like you mentioned, as a structural engineer, did my master's at the University of Illinois, focusing on AI and natural language processing for text. So at the time, I thought that the industry was already digitized purely from a research standpoint. And I thought the next big thing that we didn't really take a look at is text. We have different types of documents that we deal with in construction that no one is really touching or trying to digitize. So I focused my master's on that, graduated to learn that the industry is not digitized, and started working at a company here in New York, focusing on digitizing the workflows and moving to the cloud. So all that was kind of happening throughout my career. And then once I think that shift happened, it was apparent that there is a need for something like Gryps. Once the industry started adopting software, the data is digitized. So now the problem that exists is that now you have all this data and it's digitized, but how do you really bring it all together? And the industry by nature is fragmented. You always have the owner, the contractor, the subcontractor. So what Gryps does is it's a fully managed platform targeted at owners, because owners are kind of the head of the ownership of all of that data, right? They're dealing with all these different parties. Everyone has their own software. So we collect data from all these different systems, aggregate it, extract data from files so that it's more intelligent, and link it together in one knowledge graph and serve it in different ways that people like to interact with data. That could be a search and question answering, ChatGPT-like kind of interface, or it could be more agentic workflows. So have an agent check documents for you for compliance, for financial review, for permitting, and then also dashboards and analytics, which a lot of people care about as well.
Right. We'll get more into the way that data is changing the way that the world builds. First, I'm just going to go back to you, Mike, because you also have a very interesting background as well. Can you give us a bit of background on yourself and your role today at Skanska?
So the role that I'm in today is I lead the emerging technology team for Skanska USA Building. But as you noted, my background is a bit atypical to construction. So I have an engineering minor from West Point in structural engineering. So at the military academy, regardless of what you major in, you still had to do a foundational engineering sequence. But I also studied systems engineering. And with that came the mixed bag of all the things that are kind of core to the whole data, AI, digitalization conversation. So that was my foundation. And then my career really went through three very distinct phases. So there was, my foundational experience in the Army. I spent 5 years stationed in Germany. And I also spent time when I was in the Army as a chief of staff to a one-star general, which will come into play when we talk about agentic AI, because the whole agentic AI conversation is around digital assistants, and I was largely a human assistant at the dawn of the digital age. So I have an appreciation and a perspective on that, just having been in that role. When I got out of the Army, I went to grad school. I went to MIT. I got an MBA from the Sloan School of Management, and I also continued my systems engineering focus, but also an advanced degree in construction management. thought I was going to go into construction, but there weren't a lot of roles for someone like me when I got out of graduate school. So I actually found the role in aerospace, and I spent the majority of my time in aerospace in IT at a time when there was a lot of disruption happening around the emergence of the cloud, the introduction of mobile devices. So got basically a front row seat to what change looks like at enterprise scale from an IT perspective. And then an opportunity presented itself to come to Skanska. So I now lead the group that I was hired into. So our group started as a virtual design and construction group, like many innovation and technology groups in construction. But then as things evolved, so too did our team and our focus. So as things like laser scanners, drones, robots, augmented reality, digital twins, as these entered into the conversation, our group had to evolve to embrace those technologies. And I would say the second evolution for us was being the group that were the change agents and the early adopters, but then also having to deliver and self-perform that work. And you eventually hit a capacity point where the people who are the innovators can also be the people that deliver. So the third evolution our group went through, and that's the evolution that I've led, is where we continue to be the innovators and the change agents, but we have to do one of two things. So one is we have to stay aligned to the business to make sure we're solving for the right problems. And then second, once we kind of wrap our heads around how to implement the technology, drive so that it is adopted by the business and out in the field, so that we realize value at scale and deliver better results, not only for ourselves, but also for our customers.
Let me start by asking you, how is data changing the way the world builds?
Basically, when you think about how people make decisions in construction, it's day to day. You're making decisions in multiple topics that you may not be extremely specialized in. And I think that data helps you a lot there. In a very simplistic way, I kind of referred my life, right, to like Google Maps. Without Google Maps, I wouldn't be able to travel to different countries that I know nothing about with very little research. But I land and I do 10-minute research on my phone, and I know where I'm going and I know where to go, right? I think it's similar in construction. You're making decisions about what to buy, and there's pillars in terms of criteria for your decision making: quality, safety, speed, cost. And I really think that data can get us there. So I think the core is that, can you look at data to help you make decisions? And then you can expand that really to every area in the construction decision-making lifecycle. And I do think that data can provide that level of certainty. And the second part is that it can provide speed. Everyone knows that we need to do better in terms of speed of construction projects. Mm-hmm. And sometimes laws and policies and things like that slow us down, but that's because of kind of managing risk. So I think that data can both provide better certainty and faster decisions, moving projects to be a lot faster and a lot more efficient.
Mm-hmm. Mike, what would you say is most important in your view, how data is changing the way the world builds?
Yes, I would say Dareen's analogy to Google Maps is spot on. What makes this particular moment in time for construction particularly interesting is if you were to rewind pre-pandemic and you read articles around the state of the construction industry, we were lagging other industries in terms of just embracing basic digitalization. So just the digitalization of our core processes hadn't necessarily happened yet. And because of that, there was a lot of fragmentation. So now we live in a world where there is a lot of unstructured data, and it's both helpful to us in the sense that now that we have all this data available to us, if we're able to analyze it in a way that it gives us insights, incredibly powerful. So the use case is undoubtedly there for the power. And this is, I think, no different than the big data conversations we were having at the dawn of the digital age. Mm-hmm. And I think it's forcing some conversations that is swinging the pendulum back. I mean, as much as the digital age has led us to democratization, has led us to more flat organizations, I mean, all that is good, but it has also buried us under just, I like to call it the digital dumpster, like just a pile of unstructured data. So the interesting conversation is the right solution targeted at the right problem to process that unstructured data and give structured insights, incredibly powerful, and that's where the use cases rely. But I would say there's also the inefficient application of these technologies towards just getting more productive at applying things that are inherently inefficient. So it's striking that balance between just because you're digitizing something, just because you're applying AI to it, doesn't mean you've necessarily delivered value. And there's a nuance there that I think our industry is going through now. But when we come out of the tail end of that, we're going to be in a much better place than we were even a year ago.
Dareen, would you agree if you had to say, how has the industry done? Are there any other kind of surprises or outcomes from what's happened?
Yes. So, and I think that it's extremely critical. Like, I really like kind of what Mike was saying, and in a sense, like what he's demonstrating in terms of the leadership of a company in terms of adopting AI and how to adopt AI. Because in the past, right, we had time to pilot and test, and the technology adoption curve of the cloud is way slower than the technology adoption curve of AI. So there has to be a strong partnership, I'll say, between companies, contractors, subs, owners, companies like Skanska and companies like Gryps in terms of how to adopt that technology securely, fast, with good quality data. And then the other aspect is the experience in the industry is very important because, like you mentioned, there are core problems. So past technology, to address your question, digitized the same paper flow. Let's take submittals as one that kind of has been digitized from all angles. If you take that, it used to be a mail person, someone stamping some documents, putting them together in folders, sending them over by mail, someone else receiving them, stamping them, and then distributing copies to everyone else. And that back and forth. That back and forth just became clicks, a digital flow of the same thing. No one was trying to solve the core problems, RFIs, change orders, why they happen. With the BIM process, we tried to push decisions early on as much as possible before things happen in the field to prevent rework, but it didn't exactly reap the benefits that were marketed and promised. There were some benefits in certain areas, but not widely. Today, I think the technology is ready. The technology is available. It is much easier to implement than before, faster to test than before. So I really think that pairing construction experience with a partnership collaborative mentality, that partnership and collaboration can make sure that each person or each company focuses on certain areas to improve so that we can push the industry up together and really implement technology in the right way. You know, everything we're reading today, some of it is like, oh, AI is not giving the promise. I really don't think so. I think that AI, if adopted properly, now is the time. It's been around for many years, but there's a lot more possible today if we take that approach.
Right. Speaking of collaboration and cases, you have worked together on a project, the redevelopment of LaGuardia Airport. Mike, perhaps you can start us off talking a bit about how more structured data in that project led to better outcomes in that case and any learnings that you had.
Absolutely. And specific to LaGuardia and where Dareen and I first met each other was the Port Authority had very ambitious visions for what a digital twin might look like for a project of that scope and scale. I mean, they were wanting to embed incredible amounts of data into their BIM models. They wanted to seamlessly transfer construction information into their work order and space management and facility management systems. I mean, they're very, very ambitious. And if you think about how construction has typically done handover or turnover, it's binders. Now, we've certainly digitized all that, but the role that I had in that particular project was literally going through submittals document by document to extract engineering specs, serial numbers, warranty information, all the data that's embedded in a Word document, and basically tabulating it in a format that could either be embedded in a BIM model or handed over in a format that was structured in a way that the customer could then ingest into their systems, which are different than the systems that we use to manage construction for our workflows. So when I was in that role, extracting data from submittals, there's two ways to look at that knowing what we know today. So that is in many ways almost the perfect application for AI because it's non-value added work. It's highly repetitious. It follows patterns. And you could train a large language model or another AI technology that is good at extracting text from documents and then repurposing it and structuring it in a way that makes it more useful. So that use case is absolutely there. But the other place my head goes when I think about that workflow is the nature of documents themselves. The reason why we have Word documents and PDFs is because prior to that we had paper. So we digitized how we document information in a Word document, but yet there's no intelligence behind the document. So then my head starts to go, is the better application of technology to change the paradigm of how we even capture information? That then necessitates a different conversation. Well, if you're going to get away from cut, copying, and pasting documents and embedding information in a document, now you're talking about structuring the data, which requires some level of standardization. So there's one of two conversations, and then this I think is really at the root cause of what we're trying to solve as an industry. Is you solve it one of two ways. You either accept that you live in a very unstructured, dynamic environment and you're applying technology to then create structure, or you're saying, what if we can move upstream and change things in a way that the things that are currently unstructured are structured, which doesn't then necessitate the technology downstream. And if I had the answer to that question of which is the right, I'd be a very wealthy man. But I think that's the challenge that we're all trying to solve right now.
I think it's a balance, because if you assume you live in a world where everything is coming in as data, not as files, even if you assume you pass the legal hurdles of drawings, of contracts, all that, laws and regulations and codes are not going to become data. Not yet. I don't think that documents are going anywhere, and I don't think that text is going anywhere.
Mike, if you had to explain to someone the elevator pitch for how Skanska's using data today, and I know there's a bit of an evolution story there, but if you could really summarize it for someone who doesn't have a background in this at all, how would you do that?
So I would say it's harnessing the intelligence of our people, or solving the classic question of if we only knew what we know. Every challenge that we're facing on every job site, somewhere, someone in our company has solved that and has solved it very well. The challenge then becomes, how do you capture that knowledge in a way that it is accessible? But then also, how do you connect the dots that don't intuitively connect in a way that leads to insights? And that's where we're making a lot of investment right now as a company. And to kind of take a step back to your question, like just prior to the Chat GPT kind of revolution, we as a company had made a deliberate investment in developing a data strategy. So prior to the AI conversation, we were already on the path of recognizing the value of doing the really boring things that are kind of the underlying foundational components to being able to embrace AI. And that's setting up data lakes and structuring the data that you can structure, and having hard conversations around simple things like nomenclature. And what I mean by that is even basic things like how we refer to our own offices or how we refer to our subcontractors. So having a central function that and hiring people that have data backgrounds to build out the infrastructure, like we were already on that path when AI hit. And because of that, when AI hit, we understood that it was a major disruption and an obvious leap forward, but we also saw it as an evolution of our data journey, which is why we were able to embrace large language models and other AI technologies in stride, and why we're now applying them to data sets around solving very specific problems. And I think that is where AI has really shined for us, is when we've applied it to solve very specific problems. And I'll give you a couple of examples. So safety, obviously foundational to Skanska's culture and very important to us as an industry. Applying AI to just the volumes of information we have around incident reporting allows us to look at patterns that are the root cause for why we're having the safety incidents, and then allows us to develop countermeasures to prevent those things from happening in the first place, so that you're being more proactive instead of reactive. I mean, that's, I think, our overall kind of strategy and approach to how we're leveraging data and AI, and it's been very successful because we've applied it to these very specific use cases.
Right. And what about, can data help reduce climate, environmental impact? Are there ways that we are using data to do so?
Oh, absolutely. So we're doing that in a couple of ways. So one is we are helping our clients understand the opportunities to reduce carbon footprint through embodied carbon. I mean, that's the low-hanging fruit. And I think the use case that everyone understands is embodied carbon. But there's also a more holistic approach to sustainability when you think about supply chains, the responsible sourcing of materials, things like circularity. You can't paint that picture to help our clients or to inform design without having the large data sets to be able to demonstrate that you're actually moving the needle or having an impact. And I think we as a company, because we have committed to those things and we have made the investments to capture that data, has put us in a position where we can inform and help to guide the conversation, because many of the decisions that have the most impact on climate for the construction process are happening upstream. Like by the time a GC is brought to the table, there's things we can do, but it's more powerful if we can inform the decisions upstream, particularly around materials or particularly around means and methods that have a real impact on society. And I think that's how we've applied data to do that.
Last question to both of you. What barriers would you say remain to more widespread use of data?
I think that one is creating data sets of better quality data. So we work with owners and they could have up to 30 or more years worth of data. So I think that there's a high need to create high quality data sets before we start applying AI on top of that. And that's largely part of what we do as a company as well, of going in and figuring out what is useful from your 30 years of history and what is not. The other thing that I think the industry needs to start figuring out, which is also a choice of why we chose to work with owners, is that there needs to be stronger collaboration, and that means data sharing as well. We don't have a standard way or an objective way of sharing information with each other on things like cost and supply chain and risk when everyone is experiencing the same thing, but people are still competing. So we chose to work with owners because we think there's a higher likelihood, for example, of public agencies sharing information with each other to improve project outcomes. And the third thing is really making sure that there's strong partnership, aside from data sharing and leadership from all these people who have experienced the digitization, I think, over the past 10 years and have the experience of the core problems so that we can focus the solutions on better outcomes in the future. I think those are the three issues.
Anything to add, Mike, to that?
Yeah, so Dareen covered like the whole picture. So I'll just emphasize a couple of things that resonated for me. So one is we have to get over this mindset that every project is bespoke and different and start to structure and standardize. So doing some of the boring work that goes around creating quality data sets, which actually allows you to accelerate the use of AI, I think is absolutely key. The other thing that Dareen touched on, which I think is very important, is the trust across all the different stakeholders. And that has been a real obstacle, I think, in our industry is whenever you try to introduce a new technology or a new way of doing things, the first things you have to overcome is that initial trust and intent of why you're doing that. And I think by having these cross-industry conversations has been very healthy, in particular guiding the hand of the startups and the VCs of where they can add the most value. Because I think the mantra of technology, particularly like the Silicon Valley culture, which has really driven a lot of things, is one of disruption. And construction is undeniably ripe for disruption, but yet we are also an industry, and I've said this on many podcasts, like moving fast and breaking things is just against our culture and doesn't really work well for construction. So the way you overcome that divide is through partnership and collaboration. And I think the startups and the VCs that have taken the time to understand the root cause of the inefficiencies in our industry and have focused very well on that by partnering with the GCs and the owners have had a lot of success. The ones that are just throwing technology at a problem that they don't understand and they think, well, technology equals good, you don't see as much adoption. So I think once we overcome some of those things, that will accelerate the AI and the data conversation.
Great point to end on. And with that, I'm going to thank you very much, both of you, for being here today. Excellent insights and conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Today, we've explored how data is fundamentally changing the construction industry. We heard from Dareen Salama, CEO of Gryps, who explained how her company helps aggregate and structure fragmented data from various sources, making it intelligent and accessible. She highlighted how this leads to better decision-making, increased speed, and reduced risk, comparing it to how Google Maps helps us navigate unfamiliar places. We also spoke with Mike Zeppieri, VP of Emerging Technologies at Skanska USA Building, who spoke us through Skanska's journey working with data and digital tech. Mike emphasized that AI's true value lies in solving specific core problems, and that a balance between innovation and structure is key to realizing its potential. Both guests stressed that while technology has advanced rapidly, The industry is still navigating how to best implement it to improve efficiency, enhance safety, and drive real value. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Shaping Sustainable Places. Follow us on your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss out next time. And please reach out if you want to comment on something we discuss. You can mail us at podcast@skanska.com or via our Skanska Group LinkedIn account. Until next time, I'm Emalee Mandl, and this is Shaping Sustainable Places.